Got my coffee, my Christmas coffee, 3 lines, my Christmas coffee mug. Level 1 says go away. Level 2, which is where we are, not yet. At the bottom it says how may I help you. Lovely. All right. Video number 5 or 6, I don't know how many, for all of my astounding 3 subscribers. Where are we? Here's where we are. 169,411 cases now in Ontario. That's the cumulative total since the start of the pandemic. 10-11 months, 169,411. So we are now at 1.14% of Canada, or not Canada, but Ontario's 14.8 million people have been identified as having a confirmed, love air quotes, don't you? Confirmed cases of COVID. Already talked about the fact that even according to Ontario's own Associate Chief Medical Health Officer Barbara Yaffe, 50% or almost 50% false positive rate. Leave that aside for now. So where are we? December 25th. I thought they were going to report 2 days all at once. They broke it down by day. They said that on December 25th, we had 2,159 cases. On December 26th, 2,102 cases. The province didn't release how many tests there were done on those 2 days. Positivity rate, 3, 4, 5. Are we at 55,000, 60,000, 70,000 tests? Don't know. But as we can see, I think that's now 12 consecutive days of 2,000 or more cases in the province. Moving the needle ever so slightly in this massive province. Understand, Ontario, 14.8 million. That would make us a decent-sized country in Europe. Bigger than Sweden. Sweden's 10.1 million. We're bigger. But so we're in lockdown, right? For 4 weeks. And I have my doubts. I think this is going to go on and on and on. But regardless, so a lockdown that really isn't a lockdown because meanwhile, while you can't gather more than 10 people outdoors, while you can't have anyone in your home, while businesses are being shut, and talking more about that in a bit. Meanwhile, planes are coming in from all around the world, and I think I'm going to make this a daily activity. Just where are the planes coming from? Where? Toronto International Airport. These are the arrivals for December 27th. We have planes from Turks and Caicos, 2 planes coming from New York, 3 planes coming from Newark, 1 from New Delhi, from Seoul, 2 from Philadelphia, 2 from Charlotte, 2 from Amsterdam, 2 from Frankfurt, Germany, 4 from Chicago, Lahore, Pakistan, Barbados, Abu Dhabi, Dallas, Dubai, Tampa, 2 from Detroit, Los Angeles, Fort Lauderdale. We have 3 planes from Fort Lauderdale, 3 planes from Fort Myers, also in Florida. Orlando, we have 2. People going down to Disney World, or yes, Disney World. Bogota, Colombia. We got planes coming from Atlanta, Zurich, Paris. A couple planes from Cuba, 2 from Hong Kong. Plane from Houston, from Nassau, 2 of them actually, 2 from the Bahamas. West Palm Beach, Cancun has 2 planes coming in. Istanbul, Montego Bay, 2 planes. Washington, D.C., 3. Liberia, 2. Dominican, 2. Lots of people going down, lots of snowbirds. Kingston, Jamaica, Boston, Mexico. We have at least 4 planes coming in from Mexico. I already mentioned Cancun. Make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planes. Antigua, London, England, Heathrow at 8:15 p.m. from the hotbed of the new strain of the supposedly deadly coronavirus. Although for 99% percent plus, not. Taiwan, Poland, and 2 from Shanghai, China. That's 70 plus planes coming into Toronto. Probably in and around 10,000 passengers, give or take, coming in to Toronto. And don't worry, I know a lot of people are like, well, that's Toronto. Well, Toronto's a hub. Without checking, I think it's Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver. There are only certain airports in Canada receiving international flights. So don't worry if you live in a smaller community. There are likely people coming from all around the world to visit you because we're in a global pandemic and we are in lockdown. Depends. For some, we're 70 plus planes. We got people coming from all around the world. The lockdown that isn't a lockdown. If you're a small business owner, if you're a waiter, waitress in a restaurant being thrown out of work, you're locked down. But if you want to fly down to Montego Bay and come back, if you want to fly down to Kingston, Jamaica, if you want to fly down to the Barbados, to Dominican, to Cuba, to Turks and Caicos, not a cheap island, that's okay. So don't worry. Those who can afford to go down to Orlando, to Disney World and stuff like that, Bob's your uncle, you're allowed, okay? It's not a lockdown for everyone, okay? Or certainly, we're all in this together. To get serious, article today published out of Global News talking about the number of evictions happening in Toronto. These are people for whom the lockdown is devastating. They've lost their jobs, they've lost their income. Everyone knows Toronto rents are not cheap, anything but. And so landlords, they don't get a break. They still have to pay their mortgages, their taxes, their utilities, whatever the case may be. They still have upkeep costs, and they don't have money coming in. And so, it's trickle down, to use a favorite term of some political types. The pain is trickling down. The banks are going to get hurt. The airlines, we're looking after them. But someone working a job in Toronto who's lost their income, can't pay their rent, the landlord, I'm not going to belabor this point too much, but the landlord, the bank isn't going to forgive the mortgage payments. And this is what happens. I ended off my video last time, my most recent video, talking about, how we live in a democratic system, how we have the Westminster form of parliamentary democracy. And basically the way it works is someone gets the idea for legislation, they write it out, it's brought forward to the House of Commons. I'm going to talk about federally now, just to keep things a little more focused. So they bring forth their legislation, it's debated on the floor of the House of Commons. They have a first reading of the bill, and then there's a debate. There are also committees that go on. And committees are, you'll have the House Standing Committee on any number of things. Health, we could very easily create a committee on lockdown measures, on NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions, and have a forum and have the biggest element of this is to have stakeholders being given the chance to be heard and for the legislation to be thoroughly vetted, so that all stakeholders, so that you can see the full ramifications. Just sitting around a table with advisors, and if you're sitting around with epidemiologists, virologists, infectious disease experts, of which I am none of the above, okay, and I think they should have a seat at the table, but I don't think they should have the only seats at the table, because these measures spiderweb out, and the ramifications, the pain, the misery that they bring, these concerns are not being addressed. We have to stop viral spread. Okay, what is your proposal? Well, we're going to propose that we're going to shut a bunch of businesses down. Okay, what measures are we going to have in place to ensure that individuals can pay their rent, so that business owners can pay their rent? Well, we'll here, everyone can have $2,000. Here, we'll call it the CERB, Emergency Relief Benefit. Boom, 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 $2,000. Is that enough? Well, whatever. We did something. And now we're seeing the fallout of it. And basically, this is what happens when legislation is brought in by dictate and not through our normal Canadian parliamentary system of democracy system. Our system is horrible. Democracy is brutal. Stakeholders are given the chance to be heard. It's slow, it's laborious, as I mentioned before. Trudeau famously, in a town hall type meeting, admitted to having a certain degree of admiration for China and their basic dictatorship because of the speed at which it allowed them to move. They can turn on a dime. They don't have to go through our normal democratic process, so they can move faster, turn on a dime. But there is an enormous cost to it. Rush decisions are not always good decisions, and we're seeing that now. So those who have a seat at the table, international travelers who want to keep traveling, they got the bucks, their concerns, their needs are addressed. We have over 70 flights coming in today. We had over 60 yesterday. Oh, I'm going to do this daily. I mean, how many people are coming in? And, under the guise of a global pandemic, we're being told that that's okay, but the schlubs, the mass, well, you just suck it up. You're going to have to put up with it. Not right. It's not right. Now, we've been told for months now, it's 10 plus months, that we've been told that there's this deadly virus with its 99.7 recovery rate. If you go off of Nature magazine's published study out of Iceland, where they've tested the living bejeebers out of COVID, finding they've done over 400,000 tests in a population of 340,000. So they've done more tests than they have people. So they've been really able to hammer COVID with science. 99.7% recovery rate. And further disclosure, for the longest time, I only knew one person who had COVID. In my social media network on Facebook, I have like 700 plus friends, followers. And there was a woman with whom I went to high school. And I've been anti-lockdown from the beginning, and expressing those opinions starting in March and April. And I don't consume the news. The news is doing a horrible job. They're putting a flashlight under their chin. Devastating numbers in Toronto. Scary scenario put forth by forecasts and modeling. People, how do you feel about COVID? Oh, I'm scared. I'm worried. Good. You're doing what you're told, because the news has stopped reporting. They're telling us how to feel. They're telling you to be scared, worried, concerned. And people are like Pavlovian dogs. Most people are responding with fear, concern, and worry. So anyway, I was sharing my anti-lockdown sentiments on Facebook, and friends of mine admonished me and said, you have to take this serious. So-and-so, someone I went to high school with, is fighting for her life. She's got this bug and she's fighting for her life. It's like, whoa, okay. Could be wrong. I was able eventually to have a conversation with this individual, an online chat. And so, whereas I had conjured up images of this high school classmate of mine being intubated and, lying on her stomach on a ventilator in an ICU. She was in a motel room north of Toronto, had contracted the virus in a long-term care facility where she worked, and didn't want to take it home, and so she isolated in a motel room, and she was sick. And now, for the longest time, that was the only one I know. Now I found out that I have a sister-in-law who, unfortunately, sadly, is not in the best of health. She's been hospitalized previously, not for COVID. Now it's for COVID, or at least they say it's for COVID. And but as I say, she has health issues, and I'm praying for her. And as well, her husband contracted it. No hospitalization. He did get sick. He was in bed for a few days, and they have children, two of whom also contracted the virus, from what I understand, or at least they tested positive, but they didn't get sick. They didn't get COVID-19. They were healthy, normal, happy kids. Aside from the fact that they have a mother in hospital, which is disconcerting. But as I say, my sister-in-law, has been in hospital before. She does have health issues. Cause and effect. It's difficult to make that determination, especially for me with no medical background. But I talked before, when I ended my last video, I ended it off with saying we do not derive our rights from government. Government is not where our rights come from. Our rights come from God. And I know a lot of people don't believe in God. They think that the creation is just some cosmic accident, that there was a big bang 4 or 5 billion years ago, that matter just was blub, blub, blub floating around in the cosmos, and then that by some accident, this incredibly complex, diverse, incredible world, that it just came to being by accident. That I've heard it said before, time plus matter plus chance created the human brain. My intellect can't reconcile that. I can't believe that something as incredibly complex as this world, as my brain, as your brain, our central nervous system, the whole thing, and that this was just some chance occurrence, that it was random selection, or Darwinian theory of evolution, natural selection, just random mutations. I don't believe in that. If you look at the order in this universe, it's not random. So it's a little bit about my faith. And our rights as individuals, as human beings, do not come from government. In our own Constitution, the preamble, Canada's Constitution, like the American Constitution, we have a preamble, and in the preamble of the Canadian Constitution, it recognizes the supremacy of God. And I spent almost 10 of my first 12 years growing up in the United States of America. I was born in Canada, but I wasn't even a year old when we moved to New York City. Later lived in New Jersey. I learned to talk New Jersey up until I was there, till I was in grade 4. And after grade 4, we moved back to Canada for a short time, and then we moved to Portland, Oregon. So I spent a fair amount of time growing up in the U.S. I can still recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I can even recall from memory the entire preamble to the U.S. Constitution, we the people. But in their Declaration of Independence, they also recognize God. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I remember the Will Smith movie of that name, The Pursuit of Happiness. Those rights come from God. And I would submit, it's my belief, that we've gone through a wonderful period over the last 500 years, we've had a very nice progression. When Christ came down and was born into this world, went to the hill of Calvary, died for our sins, resurrected on the third day. For 200-300 years after that, the Christian faith spread like wildfire throughout the Roman Empire, Asia, Africa, throughout the known world, what we knew of the world back then. And why did it spread like wildfire for the first time? For most people, they were being told that they could have their own personal relationship with their Creator through the Son, Jesus. And this was radical because prior to that, you had to go through an intermediary. You had to go to a temple. You had to make offerings. You had to, you had to satisfy the dictates of human beings. Now, Christianity came along, and people were being told that through acknowledgement of Jesus as Lord and Savior, that they could have a personal relationship with God. Groundbreaking. The slave, the free, everyone. There was no hierarchy. Jesus taught his followers that if you want to be first, you have to be last. If you want to be served, you have to serve. Radical. And that, as I said, that spread like wildfire for 200 to 300 years. And the Romans didn't like it because this was not their system. They were a hierarchical system, authoritarian system. And now you have people who are bypassing their authority. They are answering to a higher authority. And the Romans didn't like it. And they persecuted the Christians, threw them to the lions, drawn and quartered, burned at the stake, you name it, boiled in oil. Horrible period. Many martyrs to the faith. They acknowledged, people understood that this life is transient, that we're not here forever, and they were not willing to repudiate their faith, their belief in God, in Jesus. So they died and went to eternal life. Now, the Romans eventually, sometime in the 300s, sometime in the 4th century, gave up. They said, all right, we're a Christian empire now, under Constantine. We're a Christian empire, and they organized the Christian faith. I would submit that they, rather than reconciling the Roman Empire to the Christian faith, they didn't do that. They reconciled the Christian faith to the Roman Empire. They changed the Christian faith. They instituted ordinances, rules, and if you wanted access to the Father, you had to go through them. Not through the Son, but you had to go through them to get access. You had your day of obligation. You were. I won't go into too much detail. I'm not I'm not an epidemiologist, virologist, infectious disease expert, not a lawyer, and I am not a theologian, and I have not attended any seminary. I have taken university. I did take a course in biblical studies, humanities course. But allow me to have a drink of my coffee. So from sometime in the 300s until the 16th century, in the 1500s, sometime around there, that's when Martin Luther and other reformers were fed up with the abuses of Rome, and they protested. Hence the word Protestant, protesting, from protest. They protested against the abuses of Rome, and they started to push back. And over the next 100 or so years, push back. The Europeans found out that there was this wonderful continent of North America, and they found out they could escape the persecution of the Church of Rome by fleeing to North America. And I know this opens up the whole can of worms about the treatment of Canada's and the North American indigenous population. I mean, we didn't discover North America. I mean, North America was always here. There were people living here, millions. There's wide estimates as to how many million, but it was in the millions, and they were treated absolutely horribly. But understand that for in and around 1200 years, the Christian faith had been administered by an authoritarian regime, and we started to move within the church. The abolitionist movement came out of the Protestant churches, and finally abolished slavery. Should have happened long ago, but as I said, when you're under the iron fist of an authoritarian government, authoritarian governance, where people aren't given the right, where people don't have rights, where their God-given rights are denied to them. I'm rambling, and I know it, but so we've had this progression, and society's been doing, I mean, certainly better now than it was in the year 1400, 1500, 1600. I'd submit that for the last 40, 50, maybe 60 years, we've been getting further and further and further away from God, from the acknowledgement of a creator. And that creates problems. We now think we're gods. We want to eliminate all pain and suffering. And that's noble. But often in trying to eliminate all pain and suffering, we create even more pain and suffering. And so to bring this back full circle, these lockdown measures, we've been told that the purpose behind these lockdown measures are to mitigate pain and suffering. And yet the lockdown measures themselves are heaping pain and misery, and I would submit even more pain, and exponentially more pain and misery than the virus ever could. The global economy has shut down, and I'd have to look up the numbers again, but you can look it up yourself. The UN is now saying that we're in the midst of a global hunger pandemic, not because of COVID, but rather because of our response to COVID. And the slowdown in the global economy has hammered supply chains, and it's hammered wealth. And who gets hurt the most? The poor. Poor developing nations are the ones bearing the biggest brunt of this. They're poor to begin with, and now they can't. People are being locked down, can't go to work. And people, disproportionately children, are starving to death. Why? Because we're afraid of a mostly, and I'm going to say it again, it's counter-narrative, but it's a mostly benign virus. We've dealt with viruses, norovirus, Zika virus, influenza viruses, and now a coronavirus, a novel coronavirus. Is this worse than the flu? According to everything I've read, yes, it's worse than the flu. Exponentially worse. Was Fauci right when he said that this was greater than 10 times more deadly than the seasonal flu? No, he was wrong. He stated it categorically as fact that SARS-CoV-2, that the COVID-19 is at least minimum 10 times more lethal than influenza. He was wrong. It'd be nice if he would admit it. It's hard, you make a mistake, own it. Canada was supposed to have 100 to 200,000 dead this year from COVID in the first year. That's according to the Imperial College of London. They were wrong. And we were supposed to be lined up 8 deep to be put in a bed in ICU. The forecasts were wrong. Computer modeling is not science. It's a guess, an educated guess, but a guess nonetheless. and experts are wrong, I would argue, they are wrong more often than they are right. I've gone on for 30 minutes. Going to try and keep these to 20. See you tomorrow. We'll find out where people are landing tomorrow and what's in the news. God bless. And pastors, open your churches. Check out Criminal Code Article 176. Might help. Open your churches. People need this. God bless.